Hello Planeswalkers, Andrew here, with a brand new deck tech. Today, we're going to be looking at Vadrok, Apex of Thunder, otherwise known as Rodan, Titan of Winged Fury. In this video we'll be going over the build of the deck that I'll be running in paper, and as a result it's not quite optimal, not quite CEDH. I don't have an unlimited budget after all, so be warned. This is going to be a mutate heavy Spellslinger deck. Rodan is a 3/3 elemental dinosaur cat for the full Jeskai. He's got a mutate cost of 1 Azorius red and has flying and first strike. Whenever he mutates, you may cast a non-creature spell with CMC 3 or less from your grave for free. For those of you unfamiliar with exactly how mutate works, you can pay the alternate mutate cost on a creature card in your hand to play it either over or under a non-human creature you control. The stack of mutated creatures has the power and toughness of the creature on top, plus every creature type and ability of every creature beneath it. What's more, the stack is treated as a single permanent, so there's no fear of having one of the creatures in the stack singled out. This also means that if the creature is bounced to your hand, the whole stack goes to our hand. This will come in useful later on. First, we're going to look at all the creatures with mutate that we're going to run, in order to repeat Rodan's triggered ability. We run almost every single mutate creature that we can, with the exception of Evercool Phoenix, because it mainly cares only about Phoenixes. To start, we have Archipelagoer, which taps down target creatures for every time this creature's stack is mutated, and they don't untap on their controller's next untap step. Cloudpiercer has reach, and whenever it mutates, you may discard a card, and then draw a card. Cub Warden comes with lifelink, and whenever it mutates, you may make 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. Dreamtail Heron has flying and draws a card when it mutates. Lord Drakis recurs an instant or sorcery from your grave whenever it mutates, and Majestic Auracorn packs Vigilance and gains you 4 life whenever it mutates. The disturbingly muscular Porcuparrot can be tapped to deal damage to any target equal to the number of times it's mutated. Pouncing Shoreshark is one of 2 mutate cards with Flash, and whenever it mutates you can bounce an opponent's creature to their hand. Regal Leosaur gives other creatures you control +2/+1 for the turn whenever it mutates. And I know I just said a bit ago that we don't run the Phoenix because it hardly helps us, which is true for the Leosaur as well, unless you happen to play multiple creatures as creatures for the Leosaur to buff. To that end, feel free to run the Phoenix if you want to pack an extra mutate card. Sea Dasher Octopus has Flash, and draws you a card whenever it deals combat damage to a player. The Octopus and the Shoreshark are important creatures because they have Flash, which means we can mutate at instant speed with them. The Octopus has a cheaper cost, however, and so it's easier to pull off. With it, you can mutate in response to removal on another player's turn, triggering Rodan's ability to cast a card from your grave, and then choose to cast a bounce effect targeting Vadrok, bouncing the whole stack to your hand to save it. Souvenir Snatcher has flying, and whenever it mutates, you can take a target non-creature artifact. Lastly, Vulpikeet has flying, and whenever it mutates, it gains a +1/+1 counter. Next, let's take a look at creatures that are good to mutate onto. We'll call them bases. Adonto Vanguard gets +2/+0 when it attacks, and you can pay 4 life to give it indestructible, protecting the stack of mutated creatures. Dragon Lord Ojutai has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, add 1 to your hand, and put the other 2 on the bottom of your deck. Dreadhorde Arcanist has Trample, and whenever it attacks, you can cast an instant or sorcery with CMC less than or equal to Arcanist's power from your grave for free, then exile the cast spell. Dream Trawler has Flying and Lifelink, and gets +1/+0 for the turn whenever you draw a card, which happens whenever it attacks. You can also discard a card to give it hexproof for the turn, which also taps it. Geist of Saint Traft has hexproof, and whenever it attacks, you make a 4/4 white angel token with flying that's tapped and attacking. It gets exiled at the end of combat. Tyler and I have found through experimentation that mutating onto a hexproof creature is extremely difficult for your opponents to deal with. Looking at you two, Illuna and Slippery Bogle. Lone Revenant has hexproof, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, if you control no other creatures, which is likely in a mutate-based deck, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 under your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. Spark Hunter Masticore is deceptively good, packing protection from planeswalkers, the ability to burn a planeswalker for 1 damage for 1 mana, and the ability to give itself indestructible for 3 mana. Now for the big boy, the base that's only outshone by the creatures with hexproof because of how strong hexproof is. Zetalpa, Primal Dawn. Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. This card is the epitome of keyword soup, and mutating Vadrok under it will give your opponents a massive mountain to overcome. That said, since it lacks hexproof, it's easier to hit with removal, but it's still a mighty force of primal nature. We'll need to draw cards in order to keep things rolling, especially with how few mutate creatures we're actually able to run. Plus, we can run 1, 2, and 3 CMC draw spells to hit with Rodan's ability. Brainstorm draws us 3 cards, then we put 2 cards from our hand on top of the deck in any order. Cathartic Reunion has us discard 2 cards as an extra cost, then draw 3 cards. In this deck, discarding cards isn't always a bad thing, since we can just discard our cheap instants and sorceries and recur them later by mutating Rodan. Shorter Course has us draw 2, then discard a card unless we attacked with a creature this turn. Faithless Looting draws us 2, then has us discard 2, with flashback for 2 and a red. Frantic Search draws us 2, then we discard 2 and untap up to 3 lands. Mystical Tutor lets us search for an instant or sorcery in our library and put it on top of our deck, after revealing it and shuffling the library, of course. Opt has us scry 1, then draw 1. Ponder lets us check the top 3 cards of the deck, put them back in any order, shuffle our library if we so choose, then draw a card. Preordain has us scry 2, draw 1, and Secrets of the Dead lets us draw a card whenever we cast a spell from the grave. See the Truth lets us look at the top 3 cards of the deck, put 1 into your hand, and the rest in the bottom of the deck. If it was cast from anywhere other than your hand, you put all 3 into your hand instead. Thrill of Possibility has us discard a card as an extra cost, then draw 2. Whirlwind of Thought is a fun one, drawing us a card every time we cast a non-creature spell. Windfall has everyone discard their hand, then draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. For the next category, I'm just calling it Utility, encompassing our mana rocks, planeswalkers, and generally helpful spells. Arcane Signet taps for any color in our commander's identity. Bonus Round copies every instant and sorcery cast for the rest of the turn, and Burning Vengeance hits any target for 2 whenever you cast a spell from your grave. Chromatic Lantern taps for any color and lets all of our land tap for any color as well. Crystal Shard can tap to return target creature to its owner's hand unless they pay 1. This is mainly meant for Rodan to protect him. And Curator's Ward is an aura that gives enchanted creature hexproof, and you draw a card when the enchanted creature leaves the battlefield if it was historic. Slap this bad boy onto a mutated Zetalpa, and watch your enemies cower in fear. Mirror Maid enters as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the field, which means you can double down on any one of your artifacts or enchantments, or benefit from an opponent's. Mythos of Vadrok, while 1 mana too expensive to be recast by Rodan's effect, does deal 5 damage divided as we choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. If you spend a white and a blue on it, those same permanents can't attack or block, and their activated abilities can't be activated until your next turn. This allows you to either kill something outright, or lock down up to 5 creatures or planeswalkers for an entire turn cycle. If you play the political game, you can lock down one opponent's defenders and open them up to an attack by another opponent. Narset of the Ancient Way gains you life and adds mana, draws you a card for discarding a card, and hits someone if it's a non-land card, and creates an emblem that hits any target for 2 whenever you cast a non-creature spell. She synergizes nicely with Rodan. The slightly older Narset, Barter of Veils, prevents opponents from drawing more than 1 card each turn as a passive, and lets you grab a non-creature, non-land card from the top 4 cards of your library. Also, if you cast Windfall while the older Narset is out, your opponents can't draw more than 1 card besides the card in the draw phase. And if you do this on your turn, I mean, they're going to discard their hand and only draw 1. And if you manage to do it twice, they can't draw any more cards after that 1. So after the second discard, they just don't have hands. But you do. You can just dump your opponent's hands and be the only person at the table with a hand. It's great. Polywog Symbiote makes your mutate creatures 1 less to cast, and when you cast a creature spell with mutate, you draw a card and then discard a card. Rogern Crystal taps for any of our colors and has cycling for 2. Savine's Reclamation is fun. It returns target permanent with CMC 3 or less from your grave to the battlefield, and if it's cast from your grave, you can copy it. It has flashback, but you should never play its flashback ability because Rodan can cast it from your grave, preventing it from being exiled by its flashback effect. Shark Typhoon, or Sharknado, makes a shark token with flying whenever you cast a non-creature spell, with power and toughness equal to that spell's CMC. It also has cycling for X1 blue that creates an XX shark token with flying when you do. Snap returns a creature to its owner's hand and untaps up to 2 lands. Soul Ring is a classic. And Sprite Dragon has flying and haste, getting a +1/+1 counter whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Ryle's Storm Conduit hits an opponent or planeswalker for 1 whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, can scry 1, and can even copy your spells. Sunforger is an incredible value card, giving equipped creature +4/+0 and being able to be unattached for red-white to let you search your deck for a red or white instant with CMC 4 or less and cast it for free. It's a repeatable way to search your out instants and sorceries from your deck that you can then recast by mutating Rodan. Swiftfoot Boots gives equipped creature hexproof and haste. Talisman of Creativity taps for a colorless or taps for a red or blue at the cost of 1 damage to yourself. And finally, Thaumatic Compass can search for basic lands, and transforms if you control 7 or more lands at the end of the turn to Spires of Orazca, a land that can tap for a colorless or tap to untap an attacking creature an opponent controls and remove it from combat. We have to defend ourselves, of course, so we have plenty of spells with which to do so. Chaos Warp shuffles target permanent into its owner's library, then they reveal the top card of their library, and if it's a permanent, they slap it onto the battlefield. Counterspell destroys target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. What? That's Assassin's Trophy, a card that's in exactly the colors we don't run. I'm sorry, I thought everyone knew what Counterspell does. It does what it says on the tin. Dovin's Veto is a super nay. Generous Gift destroys target permanent and replaces it with a 3/3 green elephant token, and Leadership Vacuum returns each commander or target player controls to the command zone, which gets around hexproof. Then draws you a card. Negate counters a non-creature spell. Path to Exile exiles a creature and lets its controller grab a basic land. Portal of Sanctuary can be tapped to return a creature you controlled and each or attached to it to their owner's hands, but only during your turn. And Source to Plowshares exiles a creature, gaining its controller life equal to its power. Time Wipe returns a creature you control to your hand, which, as I said earlier, means returning the whole mutated stack to your hand, then destroys all creatures. And finally, Winds of Rebuke returns a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Each player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. With the exception of Time Wipe, you can cast any of these using Rodan's Mutate ability, which means you can use Sea Dash or Octopus or Pouncing Shore Shark to mutate and cast any of these spells at instant speed, leading to some fun combat tricks and unexpected responses to spells. Lastly, we come to our land base, which includes Clifftop Retreat, Command Tower, Evolving Wilds, Exotic Orchard, Glacial Fortress, Mystic Monastery, Mystic Sanctuary, Rogern Triome, Reliquary Tower, Sulphur Falls, Temple of the False God, and Temple of Triumph. We also run Rogue's Passage, which can be tapped for 4 mana to make target creature unblockable for a turn. This is great for stacking commander damage and for ensuring we hit our when this creature deals combat damage to an opponent triggers. We also run 9 islands, 6 mountains, and 5 plains. And that's the whole deck. Once again, I'd like to reiterate that this is the deck list that I'll be running in paper. As of the time of recording, I'm still a few cards short of having it in playable form, but it's what I will be running eventually. What did you think of the deck? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more from us in the future, leave a like and think about throwing a sub our way and ringing that bell. Anyways, have a great day, y'all.